Good afternoon, viewers. Welcome back to Easy Mathematics. We thank God for another day. Today we want to look at something in Basic 8, which is perfect numbers and perfect square numbers. Perfect numbers and perfect square numbers. Now, earlier this term, we are looking at skip counting, how to write numbers in words, vice versa, skip counting forward, backwards, and also standard forms. For the standard form, we are looking at the basis or the introduction for both Basic 8 and Basic 9. As we said last week, visit our previous videos for more questions and explanation on standard form. Now we take it from there and look at Basic 8 or take Basic 8 today. That is perfect square numbers and perfect numbers. Now these two numbers, different numbers, happen to be very, very confusing. What a perfect number is, what a perfect square or perfect square number is. By close of today, we will be able to identify a perfect number and a perfect square or a perfect square number. So let's read. It says that for perfect square numbers or a perfect square numbers, a perfect square number is the same as a perfect square. Good. So a perfect square number is an integer that is the square of an integer. It is an integer, okay? A perfect square is an integer. And we know that integers are positive and negative whole numbers. But with this one, a perfect number happens to be always positive. Good. So an integer that is the square of an integer, or we can say of another integer. Thus, the product of an integer by itself. The product of an integer by itself. So a square of an integer and the product of an integer, they are the same. The square of an integer simply means multiplying the integer by itself. So if I take an integer, let's say 2. If I square the 2, what I'm going to get will give me another integer. And that integer is what is referred to as a perfect square. So an example is 4 is a perfect square. Why is 4 a perfect square? 4 is a perfect square because it is the product of this integer being multiplied by itself. That is 2 times 2. So any number that is the square of an integer or of integers, then that number is a perfect number. So let's look at some examples. If you take 1, let's start from the counting numbers or from natural numbers. If I square 1, 1 times 1 will give me 1. So 1 is a perfect square number or a perfect square. Why? Because it is the square of a number, which is an integer. Now, if I go to 2, the next counting number 2, 2 times itself will give you 4. So the 4 is a perfect square. Why? Because a perfect square number is an integer that is the square of an integer. The square of an integer. So if you take 1, let's do it this way. If you take 1 and you try to square the 1, you are getting 1. Now if you take the next integer, which is 2, and you square the 2, you are getting 4. The next one is 3. When you square this, you are getting 9. Then you go to 4. The square of 4 is 16. Remember we said that the square of an integer. So the integers we have positive. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on and so forth. So 5, 6, 7, 8, so on and so forth. So here, like this, if I should square this, I am getting 25. If I should square this, I am getting 36. If I should square this, I am getting 49. If I should square this, I am getting 64. So these numbers happens to be the square of an integer. These numbers. So because they are squares of integers, then they are perfect squares. Now look at this number, 80. Is there a number times itself, or is there a square of an integer that will give you 80? No. Because there is no integer times itself that will give us 80, then it means 80 is not a perfect number. Sorry, a perfect square. 80 is not a perfect square. So for a number to be a perfect square, then it means when you multiply an integer by itself, you should get that number. So we can be asked to determine whether a given set of numbers are integers and are perfect squares or not. Now let's take the number 100. Is 100 a perfect square? For 100 to be a perfect square, then there should be an integer that when I square the integer, I should get 100. And what number is that? 10. Squaring the integer 10 will give me this integer 100. So therefore, 100 is a perfect square. 100 is a perfect square. And that is all about perfect square numbers. If I should take the number, let's say 121, you are being asked, is 121 a perfect number or not? How can I know that 121 is a perfect number? Ask yourself, which integer can I get that if I multiply the integer by itself, meaning if you square the integer, just as we've done here, if I should square the integer, I'm getting 121. And you notice that 11 squared is 21. So if 11 squared is 21, then this number is a perfect number. And that is all about perfect squares. So we can now differentiate between a perfect square number from any other number being asked. Know that a perfect square number is a number that is the square of an integer. Meaning if you multiply a number by itself, what you are going to get is what we call a perfect square. So if I have 25 times 25, since I am multiplying 25 by itself, this gives me an expression of 25 squared. So multiplying 25 by 25 gives you 625. Let's see. 25, 25. 5, 5 is 25. 5, 2, 10. You have this. This is also 10. You have this 2, 2, 4. Plus this, you have 5. So it gives you 625. So the 625 is a perfect square. The 625 is a product of 25 times 25. So this 25 is a perfect square. And the 25 itself is also a perfect square. Why? Because 25 happens to be the square of 5. And that is what we call a perfect square or a perfect square number. Good. Now let's look at the perfect number or perfect numbers. Perfect square numbers or perfect square is totally different from perfect number. What is it saying? It says that a perfect number is a positive integer that is equal to the sum of its factors, excluding the number itself. So if I want to know whether a given number is a perfect number, 1, I have to know the factors of that number. 2, of the numbers excluding the number. Now, if the number you are summing, the numbers you are summing, happens to be equal to the number you find the factor, then that number is a perfect number. So an example. Remember, I said that a perfect number is a positive integer that is equal to the sum of its factors. So the sum of that number's factors, excluding the number, is a perfect number. So let's take a number 10. Let's determine whether 10 is a perfect number or not. So now, if I take 10, what are the factors of 10? Because before I can know that 10 is a perfect number, I have to know the factors of 10. What are the factors of 10? The factors of 10 are two numbers being multiplied that can give us what? 10. So we can start with what? 1 and 10. We can go to 2 and 5. So the factors of 10 happens to be 1, 2, 5, 10. These are the factors of 10. Now, a perfect number is a positive integer that is equal to the sum of its factors. The sum of its factors excluding the number. So we are going to exclude the 10 and sum the remaining numbers. Now, when we sum the remaining numbers and we are able to get 10, then it means 10 is a perfect number. So let's sum the remaining factors. We have 1 plus 2 plus 5. Adding this is equal to 8, which is not the same as what? As 10. So therefore, 10 is not a perfect number. And that is what we call if is a perfect number. So 10 is not a perfect number. Now if you take 4, factors of 4, you have 1, 2, 4. Exclude the number, add the remaining factors. 1 plus 2 is 3. So 4 is also not a what? A perfect number. With 5, the factors of 5 happens to be 1 and 5. So if you take 5 away, 1 is not equal to 5. Now let's look at 6. Taking 6, finding the factors of 6, you have 1, 2, 3, and 6. So for the number to be a perfect number, what we are saying is that add the factors excluding the number. So factors of 6 are 1, 2, 3, 6. So add the factors excluding the number. So 1 plus 2 plus 3, my answer is 6. So if the remaining factors excluding 6 sum to 6, then 6 is a perfect number. Then 6 is a perfect number. So now we've been able to find one perfect number. From 6, we go to 7. 7 happens to be an odd number, which happens to be a prime number, which is having only 2 factors. So 7 is out. Now let's go to 8. Find the factors of 8. 8 is 1, 8, sorry. So 1, you have 2, you have 4, you have 8. So exclude the number. Add the remaining factors. You have 1 plus 2 plus 4, which is equal to 3, 7. So 8 is not a factor. It's not a perfect number. You can try 12. Factors of 12. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. Exclude the number. Always, if you want to know whether it's a factor, it's a perfect number, exclude the number. Add the remaining factors. So we have 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 6. So let's add and see. 3, 6, right? 10, 16. So 12 is also not a perfect number. So if 12 is not a perfect number, then we go to the next number. Then we try to find the perfect, whether it's a perfect number or not. Now the next perfect number after 6. So the perfect numbers, it happens to start, it starts from 6, or 6 happens to be the smallest perfect number. From 6, we go to 28. Let's try to find the remaining 2 perfect numbers. At least, we should know 4 perfect numbers. The next perfect number is something, something. Let's try to find the next perfect number. We've given 2, 6, 28. 28 is a perfect number because the factors of 28, when you sum all the factors of 28, excluding the 28, you are going to get 28. So 28 is a perfect number. Actually, there's a simple way, there's a given formula for this, but at our level, we can't contain it. So all you can do is to find the factors of the number, add the factors excluding the number, to know whether it's a perfect number or not. So this is where we'll draw the curtains down for today's presentation. Today we look at the difference between perfect square and perfect number. We said for a perfect square, it is the square of an integer. That is, multiplying an integer by itself is a perfect square. But for a perfect number, it is the sum of its factors excluding the number. A perfect number is the sum of its factors excluding the number. The name is Christian Marco Joker. See you next time Friday, where we'll talk about we'll do something in Basic 9. See you next time. Bye-bye.